Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the way some politicians and client journalists are yet again attempting to destroy trust in politics in order to abuse the processes to stop them facing the consequences of their actions. In this case, Boris Johnson's allies in politics and in the press trying to claim that the Privileges Committee investigation is a witch hunt, and where we heard that before, and rigged against him. But in their desperation to put pressure on the committee, they've used statements that are fairly easy to expose. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So no matter how ludicrous this may seem, it is becoming increasingly likely that Boris Johnson and his allies genuinely think that he will be returning. They expect Liz Truss to win the leadership contest. Yeah, very likely. To then crash and burn. Yeah, very likely. And then for Boris Johnson to be waiting in the wings to graciously accept the profound apologies of Tory MPs and agreed to lead them to glory in the next general election. I'm not sure that's going to happen. I mean, I never said Boris Johnson had a firm grasp of reality. Quite the reverse. But in order for this highly unlikely sequence of events to pass, he must remain an MP. The Privileges Committee investigation makes this more complicated. It's currently investigating whether or not Boris Johnson deliberately misled Parliament over Partygate on several occasions. If they find him guilty on even one count, it would be a serious offence. Impossible for them to not recommend a suitable suspension long enough for a recall petition to be issued, which would absolutely succeed, and then that's it. Boris Johnson is no longer an MP. An MP could vacate a safe seat and let him fight that, so he becomes an MP somewhere else. Okay. Nadine Dorries, for example, is a die-hard Johnson supporter. She's tipped to go to the House of Lords in his resignation honours list. Her seat is very safe. So if he bunged her in the Lords, there would be a by-election there. He could go there. Job's a good one. But it is a risk. If the Johnson brand continues to be toxic to even Conservative voters, despite having stepped down, he could lose even a safe seat. Much better to retain his current seat. That's the safest of all options. But to do that, one of two things has to happen. First, ideally, Johnson's allies would like the Privileges Committee to have enough doubt about pronouncing his guilt that they do not do so. Or second, if the first doesn't occur, they would need Tory MPs to vote against the recommended punishment. Remember, the Privileges Committee doesn't have the authority to punish, only recommend a punishment. It's for the majority of MPs to say whether they agree or not. And this is where the ever-destructive Mail comes into it. The Daily Mail. Well, I'm reading it today. Maybe it was in the Mail on Sunday. I'm reading it online. It's the same thing. Now, they've written an article that paints the proceedings as a witch hunt presided over by known Johnson detractors, they say. Never mind the fact that all of the MPs on this committee have cross-party respect. But in their article, they've made mistakes. I mean, the first one's a moral one. They know full well that Johnson's guilty and that unless massive pressure is brought to bear on the committee, that his guilt will be made official. So in talking of a rigged investigation, what they are actually doing is attempting to rig it themselves. And they don't care how much further trust in politics is damaged in the eyes of the public. It's already pretty low. There's no pillar of society that these people will not make a public enemy of to serve their ends. Remember, these are the same people that attacked High Court judges. But they didn't pay close enough attention to what they were writing. At one point in the article, accused the committee of moving the goalposts after Johnson was fined by the police. I'll quote, it's referring to Johnson's allies here. Quote, arguing that it moved the goalposts by changing the inquiry's terms of reference to continue to pursue Mr. Johnson even after he'd been fined by the police. No problem here. The inquiry was begun after Johnson had been fined. In fact, the inquiry wasn't even proposed until after Johnson had been fined. So the idea that any terms of reference were changed in the investigation after Johnson received his fine are obvious lies. The dates don't just stack up. And also, the committee doesn't define its terms of reference. That was agreed by MPs. Labour put forward a very specific proposal for an investigation. and it was backed by MPs. There was no dissent. So the terms of reference were decided by that motion. They also claim that Johnson's allies are angry that the investigation is still going ahead despite Johnson having been toppled. But a couple of things here. First of all, he hasn't been toppled, past tense. He's still Prime Minister. He will still be Prime Minister for several weeks yet. Secondly, the Privileges Committee investigates potential breaches for all MPs, not just the Prime Minister. Doesn't matter that he's no longer Prime Minister. This particular breach being investigated concerns his role specifically as a minister, not just Prime Minister. And, you know, even if you take the view, if you think to yourself, well, hang on a minute, when he steps down, he's not going to be a minister either. The investigation shouldn't go ahead because, you know, he's no longer going to be in that role. I mean, that's baffling. I mean, do the police not arrest a burglar because they're no longer in the house? No, if you've committed an offence, you've committed an offence, and the investigation still has to go ahead. But also, if they're going to try and do it on the basis that he'll be stepping down, like, how does anyone know? What if the winner offers Johnson a ministerial position and he accepts? Doesn't matter what anyone says right now. Nobody can rule out the fact that Johnson may well remain in cabinet. And also, if it's their plan for him to come back and become Prime Minister another year or year and a half or something, well, then he will be Prime Minister again. So, of course, it's right that the investigation takes place. The whole premise is nonsense. And that's without even considering the fact that a mainstream newspaper is yet again trying to bring pressure to bear on authorities in order to make their allies above the law. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to bully people. And we know that this story will run. Oh, and they'll ramp it up as they feel necessary. Because, I mean, look what they did with Beergate. Almost 2 weeks on the front page as that was. And the thing is, they got their way. The police did agree to a second, much more expensive investigation, taking resources away from crime fighting in the local area, and turned up exactly the same result. A complete waste of time and money just so that the Daily Mail could sow some mistrust in politicians in general to make Johnson seem less objectionable by comparison. Because that's what this is all about. We're getting a lot of talk right now about how Tory party members didn't want Johnson brought down. Now, this may or may not be true. I don't know. What I do know is that Conservative voters absolutely want him brought down. That's why he was brought down. There is a sense in which politically, this is not even the sort of Daily Mail witch hunt to get that upset about. You know, if they get their way, either by putting enough pressure on the Privileges Committee to back down or by getting Tory MPs to vote the punishment down, they get what they want. But what they want is for Boris Johnson to remain an MP. Well, then what? If it's Johnson's plan for his successor to fail miserably and for his party to come begging him to return to lead them, what then? It means he'll have to take every opportunity to trip his successor up. Not him personally, of course. He has to keep his hands clean, as Rishi Sunak is finding to his cost. But his supporters will not mind in the slightest undermining their new leader. In fact, having Johnson on the backbenchers focused on damaging his own party so that he can once again be permitted to lead the ruins is a lot less damaging to wider politics than banishing him from Parliament to wreak havoc in the media. I saw an opinion piece, I forget by whom, but they were wondering if Boris Johnson would become a sort of UK version of Tucker Carlson. You know, a bit like Nigel Farage, but really going for it. Get himself a platform, which no end of shitty media outlets will be happy to give him, and spew utter bile at the public. Strategically, having Boris Johnson remain on the backbenchers could be a pretty good outcome for opposition parties. He's not exactly going to work towards unifying the Conservative Party after his fall. He is a vain, petty, vengeful creature. Behind the scenes, he will be working to ensure that the next Prime Minister is blighted by having a parliamentary party riven with infighting. There'll be little off-the-record briefings to journalists leaking damaging information about his replacement. Absolute godsend for Labour and the Lib Dems especially. But the problem is, in order for this to happen, the damage to politics has to be enormous. Never mind what party members think. The general public, even the swing voting public, who are much more important, know that Johnson lied. They know that. Partygate hasn't died down for them. They haven't moved on. They're still angry. If the committee lets him off, they will see a stitch-up. They know that'll be the stitch-up. The government may be reprehensible, no matter your political outlook. But select committees do tend to do their jobs diligently. You know, we have to remember, that we have allowed the worst of us to take executive control of our country, but not all politicians are alike. But if the Mail has anything to do with it, the public will believe that all is bad as each other by the time they're done. You know, often we sort of think about the Sun as coming in for particular criticism, and it has certainly caused a lot of damage in its time. You know, their role in Hillsborough still angers a lot of people, mostly around Liverpool, obviously, where you can hardly buy a paper. But even in my neck of the woods, where the disaster unfolded, you don't get many people openly supporting the Sun. The Express, I mean, they're just away with the fairies. But for real nastiness, for the most unpleasant abuses of the media, you do have to go to the Daily Mail. They're not just using their platform to push a political agenda that is against the interests of their customers. They really don't care what collateral damage they cause to get what they want. They've got no morals at all. It's just that in this case, if they do get their way, ironically, it could mean the end of the Tories in power for many years. But it will still cause a lot of damage. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.